Have you ever questioned what drives a decent person, someone loving, caring, and morally upright, to perform acts of brutality or transform into something terrifying? Picture someone you respect, someone you believe in, morphing into someone unrecognizable. What if I revealed that this phenomenon isn't merely an isolated incident but a recognizable trend throughout history and human conduct? Today we are exploring one of the most disturbing and challenging inquiries about our nature as humans. Why do virtuous individuals occasionally perform terrible deeds? By this video's conclusion, you'll discover the startling forces that drive regular people into shadow. More crucially, we will reveal how to identify and combat these influences, with the final revelation being the most essential and transformative of all. But before we continue, hit the like button on this video, share it with people who might find it valuable, and tell us in the comments which city you're watching our YouTube channel from. This exploration leads us into psychological studies, historical occurrences, and philosophical examinations that reveal the narrow boundary dividing virtue from vice. This isn't merely others' narrative. It's a reflection compelling us to examine ourselves and wonder what I would choose in their situation. Could I also fall prey to these influences? Remain here because today's discoveries might radically alter how you perceive the world and your place in it. The devil's transformation is a theory made famous by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who orchestrated the notorious Stanford prison study. His findings were deeply disturbing. Our surroundings, the positions we assume, and the power we submit to can corrupt even the most righteous people into agents of damage. Consider this carefully. History overflows with instances of regular individuals who perpetrated remarkable cruelties. The wardens in Nazi death camps, the warriors who executed racial genocide, or even the observers who remained quiet while horrors occurred. All these people weren't naturally wicked. They were, in numerous instances, typical people caught in situations that awaken humanity's darkest impulses. What causes this phenomenon? The explanation rests in psychological and social influences that mold our actions. Initially, there's authority's strength. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's compliance studies during the 1960s demonstrated that individuals would extend to extreme measures, even causing others pain when directed by an authoritative figure. In his research, subjects were instructed to administer electrical jolts to another individual who was actually a performer pretending to experience agony. Astoundingly, most subjects kept delivering jolts even when believing they caused serious damage, simply because they received orders. Consider your personal experience. How frequently do we obey directions without questioning them? Whether from a supervisor, a commander, or social expectations, what would your response be if someone powerful requested you compromise your principles for collective benefit? Another essential element is dehumanization's concept. When we remove others' humanity, categorizing them as opponents, subhuman, or inferior, justifying cruel acts becomes simpler. This strategy appears repeatedly in propaganda, warfare, and daily disputes. Harming someone becomes easier when you stop viewing them as human. Think about today's language in social and political discussions. How frequently do we witness groups reduced to labels or stereotypes? Reflect on how this reduces our compassion and connection, establishing an us versus them mindset. But dehumanization represents only part of this puzzle. Social positions and group behaviors also contribute significantly. Zimbardo's Stanford prison study vividly illustrated this. University students were randomly designated as either guards or inmates in a mock prison setting. Within days, guards displayed abusive conduct while prisoners showed extreme distress and submission signs. The shocking aspect was how quickly participants abandoned their individuality and accepted their assigned roles. This poses an important inquiry. How much does society's imposed role shape our identity? Are we genuinely free to act individually, or do we unconsciously perform parts determined by surrounding systems? These influences, authority, dehumanization, and group behaviors aren't theoretical. They actively operate in our daily existence, affecting how we think, act, and perceive others. We observe them in offices, schools, social platforms, and within families. Recognizing these influences represents the initial step in opposing them. But what about the critical moment, the precise instant when a virtuous person crosses that boundary? That moment often appears subtle. It starts with minor compromises, choosing silence when witnessing unfairness, agreeing to comply just once. Over time, these small decisions accumulate, creating a dangerous path that can result in significant moral breakdown. Pause momentarily and consider, have you ever made choices contradicting your beliefs because it seemed easier or safer? What were the outcomes? As we progress, we'll examine how to identify these moments before they escalate uncontrollably. More importantly, we'll discover how to develop resistance against these psychological influences. But first, let's address an even more fundamental question. Are certain people protected from the devil's transformation, or does it threaten us all? Stay engaged because what follows will challenge everything you believe about yourself and human nature. Let's now address the question haunting many minds. Are certain individuals truly protected from the devil's transformation? The response, however uncomfortable, is that none of us possess complete immunity. Psychologists have extensively debated personality's role in resisting corruption and moral deterioration. While specific characteristics like strong compassion, self-knowledge, and moral bravery might provide protection, the reality is that given appropriate, or perhaps inappropriate circumstances, anyone can succumb to these influences. Consider this perspective. We all possess capacity for tremendous goodness and unspeakable evil. This duality appears consistently in literature, spirituality, and philosophy. Carl Jung, the celebrated Swiss psychiatrist, described this as our psyche's shadow element, the darker, often suppressed aspects we reluctantly acknowledge. Jung believed that understanding ourselves fully requires confronting this shadow and incorporating it into conscious awareness. Have you experienced anger or jealousy so powerful it surprised you? Have you spoken or acted impulsively in ways you deeply regretted later? These represent glimpses of the shadow functioning. Left unaddressed, this shadow can expand and manifest in ways aligning with the devil's transformation. Here's the encouraging aspect. Awareness serves as our primary defense. By comprehending the psychological processes leading to moral collapse, we acquire power to resist them. So let's examine more deeply how these influences operate practically and how we can counter them. One of the most insidious processes is what psychologists term moral disconnection. This concept, introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura, explains how individuals rationalize harmful actions to avoid experiencing guilt or remorse. For instance, someone might convince themselves that everyone behaves similarly or that outcomes justify methods. These justifications create psychological distance between individuals and their actions, making wrongdoing easier to rationalize. Consider how this manifests in everyday situations. A student might cheat on examinations, telling themselves it's temporary. A manager might mistreat employees, believing it's essential for meeting corporate objectives. In these instances, moral disconnection allows people to act contrary to their values. The remedy for this is what some psychologists call moral alertness. This involves actively examining our actions and their effects, even when uncomfortable. It means questioning ourselves. Am I justifying something I know is fundamentally wrong? Another powerful approach is developing empathy. Empathy counterbalances dehumanization. When we genuinely perceive others as complex, emotional individuals, people with aspirations, anxieties, and dreams, harming them becomes much more difficult. This explains why storytelling, art, and authentic human connections are vital. They remind us of our shared humanity and eliminate dividing barriers. But what about the societal dimension? How do we address larger systems and structures that perpetuate harm and enable the devil's transformation on massive scales? This is where leadership and collective responsibility become crucial. History demonstrates that charismatic leaders can either elevate or corrupt entire societies. Adolf Hitler, for example, manipulated fear and bias to justify atrocities. Conversely, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to inspire positive change and resistance against injustice. This brings us to a crucial question. What type of leader do we choose to follow, and what influence do we exercise over others? Even without traditional authority positions, we all possess influence within our families, communities, and workplaces. The question becomes whether we use that influence to promote compassion and justice or to perpetuate harm and division. Reflect briefly on your own existence. Who are the people you admire? What values do they represent? Equally important, what example are you setting for those who look up to you? As we examine these influences, authority, moral disconnection, dehumanization, and leadership, it becomes clear that the struggle between good and evil isn't merely external. It's an internal battle each of us confronts daily. But here's the empowering truth. Just as circumstances can lead people astray, they can also guide us toward extraordinary acts of kindness, courage, and integrity. The same mechanisms that create monsters can also create heroes. So how do we ensure we remain on virtue's path? How do we cultivate strength to resist the devil's transformation when it emerges? The answers lie ahead. In the following section, we'll uncover practical approaches for recognizing and resisting forces that lead to moral failure. These approaches have been tested by psychologists, spiritual guides, and ordinary individuals who have faced extraordinary challenges. Remember, the final insight we'll explore is the most transformative of all, a realization that could change not only how you see others but also how you perceive yourself. To resist forces that can lead us astray, we must first understand that awareness alone proves insufficient. While recognizing the devil's transformation psychological mechanisms represents a crucial step, we need actionable approaches to counter their influence. Let's explore these approaches, beginning with moral bravery's concept. Moral bravery is the ability to act ethically and defend what's right even when facing fear, opposition, or personal sacrifice. It's what motivates someone to speak against injustice, protect the defenseless, or admit errors when remaining silent would be easier. But moral bravery isn't innate. It's something we develop through deliberate practice and contemplation. Think of historical figures like Rosa Parks, who refused surrendering her bus seat, igniting a civil rights movement. Or consider whistleblowers who expose corruption and misconduct, often at tremendous personal expense. These individuals weren't immune to fear, but they chose action despite it. So how can we develop moral bravery in our lives? Begin by identifying your fundamental values, the principles that matter most to you. These might include honesty, compassion, fairness, or responsibility. Reflect on times when you faced moral dilemmas. Did you act aligned with these values, or did you compromise them? One practical exercise involves imagining yourself in challenging scenarios. What would you do witnessing workplace bullying? How would you respond if pressured to follow unethical directives? By visualizing these situations and rehearsing responses, you strengthen your ability to act decisively when moments arise. Another essential approach is building strong social connections with people sharing your values. Surrounding yourself with supportive and principled individuals can buffer against negative influences. These relationships provide accountability and encouragement, making it easier to resist conformity and authority pressures. But what about when we're confronted with systems or environments seemingly designed to erode our morals? This is where situational awareness becomes vital. Situational awareness involves recognizing subtle cues and dynamics shaping behavior. For example, pay attention to group standards. What's considered acceptable or expected in given environments? If you notice patterns of exclusion, dishonesty, or harm, question them. Ask yourself, is this truly right, or have I simply accepted it because everyone else has? Additionally, consider small actions' role in creating change. Often we feel powerless facing systemic issues, but even minor acts of resistance can make differences. Think of ripple effects, how one person's decision to act with integrity can inspire others similarly. For instance, in workplaces, speaking against unethical practices might seem risky, but it can encourage others to voice concerns as well. Similarly, choosing kindness and understanding in everyday interactions can challenge the dehumanization culture that often permeates society. Let's also address self-reflection's critical importance. The philosopher Socrates famously stated that the unexamined life isn't worth living. Self-reflection allows us to identify biases, acknowledge mistakes, and grow from them. It's not about perfection but progress, becoming slightly better, more aware each day. Make it habitual to regularly ask yourself questions like, what motivated my actions today? Did I treat others with respect and empathy? Were there moments I remained silent when I should have spoken? By reflecting on these questions, you train yourself to act with greater intention and integrity. But what about the ultimate question? Can the devil's transformation ever be completely neutralized? While the answer may depend on individual and societal factors, the key lies in fostering what psychologist Philip Zimbardo calls heroic imagination. The heroic imagination is the mindset allowing ordinary people to take extraordinary actions facing moral challenges. It's the belief that you too can make differences, that heroism isn't reserved for the exceptional but is accessible to all of us. To cultivate this mindset, start by seeking opportunities to practice small heroic acts. These might include standing up for someone being treated unfairly, volunteering to help those in need, or simply choosing kindness over indifference in daily interactions. It's also helpful to study lives of those who have exemplified heroism, from historical figures to modern changemakers. Their stories remind us that courage and compassion are within our reach. At this point, you might wonder, what is the most powerful insight of all? What final realization can truly transform how we see ourselves and the world? That answer lies in understanding humanity's profound interconnectedness. The line between good and evil doesn't run between groups of people or nations, it runs through every human heart. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn once wrote, the battle line between good and evil runs through every person's heart. This realization is both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that we're all capable of both harm and healing, but it also gives us agency to choose. Every moment presents a new opportunity to act with integrity, to resist darkness's pull, and to contribute to a world rooted in compassion and justice. Stay with me because in the final part, we'll dive deeper into how these ideas can apply to your own life. Together, we'll uncover practical steps to not only resist the devil's transformation, but to become a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. At this point, we've uncovered psychological mechanisms that can turn good people toward darkness. Authority, moral disconnection, dehumanization, and group dynamics influence. We've explored how awareness, moral courage, empathy, and self-reflection serve as defenses against these forces. Now let's focus on what you can do starting today to become not just resilient but a source of light in challenging circumstances. The first step is recognizing your influence. No matter how small or insignificant your role may seem, you have power to shape your surrounding environment. In every interaction, you contribute to norms and values that guide others. Are you fostering a culture of kindness, fairness, and accountability? Or are you silently allowing harmful behaviors to persist? Consider the story of someone who changed history's course through seemingly small actions. Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist during World War II, while initially motivated by profit, used his resources to save over 1,000 Jewish people from the Holocaust. His story testifies to how a single individual, even amid one of history's darkest chapters, can make profound differences. You don't need extraordinary circumstances to follow this example. You can start in your own community, workplace, or even within your family. Speak up when you see injustice. Offer support to someone feeling isolated. Challenge stereotypes and assumptions that divide people. These small acts, when multiplied, have power to transform not only individual lives but entire communities. Another vital step is educating yourself and others. Knowledge is one of the most effective tools against manipulation and moral erosion. Study history, psychology, and philosophy to deepen your understanding of how and why people make choices they do. Share this knowledge with others, not to preach or lecture, but to spark meaningful conversations that inspire reflection and growth. For example, have you ever considered how much the stories we consume influence our thinking? Films, books, and media often shape our perceptions of good and evil, right and wrong. By seeking narratives that challenge your assumptions and broaden your perspective, you build more nuanced and compassionate understanding of the world. Let's also discuss resilience facing pressure. Standing up for what's right often comes with risks, social rejection, professional consequences, or even personal loss. This is why resilience is so crucial. Resilience doesn't mean being fearless. It means continuing to act according to your values even when fear is present. To build resilience, focus on practices strengthening your mental and emotional well-being. These might include mindfulness meditation, journaling, or seeking guidance from mentors and trusted friends. Surround yourself with a community of people who uplift and inspire you. Resilience isn't something you build alone. It thrives in connection with others. But what happens when we fail? Because inevitably we will. There will be moments when fear or pressure overcomes us, when we act in ways we later regret. This is where self-forgiveness becomes essential. Self-forgiveness isn't about excusing harmful behavior, but about acknowledging mistakes, taking responsibility, and committing to do better. It's about understanding that failure is part of human experience and that growth often comes from confronting our shortcomings. Reflect briefly. Is there a time when you fell short of your own values? How did you respond to that failure? Did you learn from it, or did you let it define you? The ability to forgive yourself and others is one of the most powerful tools for breaking free from harm cycles perpetuated by the devil's transformation. It allows you to move forward with clarity and purpose rather than being weighed down by guilt or resentment. Finally, let's return to the most profound insight of all: humanity's interconnectedness. When we recognize that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart, we begin seeing others and ourselves with greater compassion. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does allow us to approach the world with empathy and commitment to healing rather than judgment. Think about your actions' ripple effects. Every choice you make, no matter how small, sends waves into the world. Will your actions contribute to division and harm, or will they bring people together and inspire hope? Imagine a world where each of us takes responsibility for our own choices, where we resist forces that dehumanize and divide, and where we strive to create environments nurturing compassion and integrity. This isn't an unattainable ideal, it's a reality we can build one decision at a time. As we reach this journey's end, let me leave you with one final challenge. Reflect on what you've learned today and ask yourself how you can apply it in your own life. How will you recognize and resist forces that pull you away from your values? How will you contribute to a world where goodness prevails over darkness? The answers to these questions aren't easy, but they're worth pursuing. Because ultimately, the battle between good and evil isn't fought on distant battlefields or in abstract theories. It's fought within each of us every single day. So the next time you face a moral choice, remember this: you have power to choose. You have power to resist. And you have power to be a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. The question is, will you rise to the challenge?